proud privilege to honor to welcome Professor Dr. G. Gopakumar as a distinguished speaker at this webinar today. Moreover, any introduction to him would fail to do justice to a personality like him. He is a leading political scientist and psephologist. He specializes in the areas of international relations, comparative politics, and Indian politics. He was former Vice Chancellor of Central University of Kerala and served as professor at University of Kerala for over 15 years. Dean of Social Science, Professor and HOD of Political Science, University of Kerala. He also served as the Director General of the Institute of Parliamentary Affairs, Government of Kerala, Director of V.K. Krishnamenon Study Center for International Relations, Director of Nehru Study Center, and also the UGC Emeritus Fellow, Indian Council of Social Science Research Senior Fellow. He had published 12 books and 145 research articles. He also a popular TV panelist in Kerala and is known for objective and scientific political analysis. Sir, we are pleased to have you with us today in this webinar. Now I invite Professor Dr. G. Gopakumar on behalf of Faculty of Public Administration, School of Distance Education of Kerala University to deliver his vast and in-depth knowledge on the topic Administrative Response to a New Normal Society, Issues and Potentialities in the Indian Context.
Thank you. Dr. P. Ajay Kumar, Vice Chancellor of the University of Kerala, Dr. Nazeeb, Member Syndicate, Dr. Vasanta Gopal, Director, School of Distance Education, Dr. Ajita Shashidharan, Head of the Department of Faculty of Public Administration. Let me at the outset wish you all very happy good morning and also the best for the national webinar on administrative changes for the new normal world post-COVID era. You have requested me to open up a discussion with a theme presentation on the area administrative response to a new normal society, issues and potentialities in the Indian context. This day, December 10th, is particularly important for the whole world. As all of you know that we are celebrating the Human Rights Day. So being International Human Rights Day, I think this is significant because human lives were severely affected during the last nearly 20 months of COVID manifestation and the impact that COVID has made across the world. We particularly noticed about it since March 2020, although the trends in slighter way was appearing slowly. And now we are moving to the new year in a couple of weeks' time, and we should think ahead so that we can plan how to emerge stronger from these complex problems. And therefore, we wanted to ensure that we have a safer and stronger 2022 based upon our lessons, the lessons that we had learned from COVID-19 and how we can make a brighter 2022. When epidemic occurred or pandemic occurred, government was challenged with the immediate problem of how to organize the defense and management to restrict the pandemic. And the immediate aspect was how do we plan about it from a legal angle? Because the government is a legal entity. And the government very soon found that the Epidemic Act of 1897 is completely outdated. So the parliament cannot meet during that emergency time, health emergency situation. and or even a plan of a virtual parliament was not thought of, and therefore the government invoked the Disaster Management Act 2005 for combating pandemic. This was how it all started. Because before the government, three things were extremely paramount. Number one, crucial public services are to be maintained. We know very well that transport was closed, except electronic telecommunication. Otherwise, there were problems. But public services like bus, train, even flights were affected severely. So how to organize a crucial public services? Number two, how can we ensure people to continue enjoying their fundamental rights? Because we know very well that the pandemic disturbed our society and economy and culture. And suddenly, we were all thrown into a very difficult and complex situation where our fundamental rights were completely affected. So how to regain those fundamental rights? And number three, how to expand government accountability during the crisis. The task of public administration comes here. It is not just a political task, but also basically an administrative task. The crucial or the fulcrum of the whole task fell upon public administration or the executive. Of course, political accountability with the political executive, but the larger part of the functions are to be done by the government, the permanent bureaucracy, and they have to be guided by, on the one side, a legislature or the parliament, which was not functioning then, and on the other, the judiciary, which went virtual and gave suggestions and also guidelines, because the judiciary suddenly woke up to the situation because the whole institutional disruptions were affected, and for the government, it was for the judiciary to take up the new responsibility at that situation and guide the administration. We know very well that our health infrastructure was fragile. We were thoroughly unprepared. We know that Article 21 of the Constitution guarantees right to life. And this certainly includes the fundamental right to health. Suddenly, the pandemic disturbed everything, including our right to health, because there was lockdown, livelihood issues. You will be thinking about the picture of the thousands and thousands of unorganized migrants, interstate migrants, walking all the way from Kerala to Maharashtra or to Madhya Pradesh or to Lucknow. So they were thoroughly affected. There was no transport system to help them, nor they had food, nor money for pocket expenses. They have to reach home because at least they have a small shelter there. But how to walk up all these 3,000 kilometers or more? There was economic instability. Internal migrants were affected. Certainly, it also raised questions of law and order issues. There were complaints of police excesses and administrative harassment. In addition to all these, social stigma also emerged. Public safety and societal stability became a very big question. And therefore, the institutional accountability fell straight to judiciary and certainly parliament, it was not functioning, but they can guide through committees. And certainly how judiciary can play a very important role to monitor our central government and state governments. We cannot simply improve health infrastructure all of a sudden. It requires planning, proper ground assessment, and implementation of health and social security measures. All these cannot be done in 24 hours. Supreme Court was guiding through virtual case hearing and High Court also, because the whole country witnessed an emergency situation. There was another major problem because internet accessibility was a big issue. We know that even today, internet accessibility and technological awareness continues to be big challenges for the common people. So, the pandemic exposed the health infrastructure, how we mismanaged things, and the institutional lacunae added with our procedural inefficiency and poor and insufficient response from the government. I think it is exactly here students of public administration should take care, because there was poor health infrastructure, institutional deficiencies, procedural inefficiency, because you know that we inherited a colonial infrastructure and we wanted to transform to an administrative state, but procedural delay and inefficiency factored into this. And poor and insufficient response from the governmental agencies continues to be another big problem. The government was not transparent, accountability was restricted, and therefore to speed up procedural hurdles and overcome that, and to make a responsive democracy at a time when, which is called an extraordinary situation, we required extraordinary innovations, and public administration should take up this lead for providing extraordinary innovation. The bureaucrats and also the public servants are to be motivated for public service. Higher bureaucracy is equally important. But we should realize that this is a country where poverty, malnourishment, hunger, inequality, etc. prevails at a larger level. Crisis of hunger widened during this period. Poor migrant workers were outside the reach of the public distribution system. This indeed had led to a crisis of governance. We should ask ourselves why the public distribution system was not made universal or accessible to all. I think we should be careful in ensuring a rule-bound state with an inclusive character. But so far we have not done that, and that is why the larger sections of the unorganized laborers and interstate migrants were deprived of public distribution benefits. Because I'm discussing this from the larger context of the nation. Actually, we should have identified beneficiaries in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. But the big problem is that we continue to lead an over-centralized bureaucracy, both at the national and state level. What we require is locally grounded interventions, but many states, Kerala may be an exception, but many states lack organizational wherewithal for a rapid decentralized action. Now, Kerala is lucky because political commitment was there. The state is also small. Connectivity is higher. Communication is also possible thanks to our media, social media, electronic media, etc. and the organized set. So Kerala is certainly a different case. But if you look at the larger states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, all of these, including Tamil Nadu, there were huge problems. And suddenly we cannot ask administration to go for decentralization because no such preparations were made. Had we been decentralized, things would have been far, far better. It is exactly here we should have encouraged NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and non-state organizations to collaborate with the government, at least in updating the list of beneficiaries, so that we can depend upon our bureaucrats at the subordinate level for urgent interventions. So challenges encountered by the healthcare workers, lack of public-private establishments, even enhanced testing facility, etc. These were totally absent, and this situation demanded almost like a real health emergency. We are a huge nation, almost reaching 140 crores of the population, which constitutes around 17 to 18% of the world population, and that too with a lot of limitations in terms of infrastructure, social development, economic progress, etc. And here, a concerted role and action from government, non-governmental agencies, non-state actors, civil society intervention, etc. are required. Now, with this background or introduction, let me identify some of the major areas which are interconnected. Actually, they are challenges too, because governmental infrastructure, ideology, and public policies are important, and inclusive solutions are vital. But given our limitations, how to address the following challenges? I have identified 7 areas where we should have focused, but continue to focus even now. They are equally vital in the present context. I identify the 7 points below. Number 1, economy. Number 2, social stability. Number 3, healthcare. Number 4, education. Number 5, national safety and security. Number 6, climatic issues, including climate change. And number 7, trust in government. So I'm going to briefly expand these 7 points. These are all interconnected. One cannot sustain on its own. It required constant collaboration and connectivity so that we can convert or transform these challenges into great opportunities. Let us start with the economy first. Before pandemic, our economy was not bad, I would say that. It was moving during the last 7 to 8 years. It was moving between 5 to 8% economic growth rate. Even when the economic growth at the global level declined, Indian economy was still resilient, constituting a growth of 5.8%. But suddenly, when pandemic occurred, economy collapsed across the world. In some countries, there was negative economic growth. Global economic growth rate was less than 4%. And how India faced the situation was pathetic, because the whole businesses came to a grinding halt. Education institutions were closed. Professional organizations were closed. They picked up the potentiality of work from home a little later, but straight away there was a closure, and industries were also not functioning, because you cannot expect manufacturing to take place from work from home, because businesses were severely affected. So our economy also went down to 4% or below 4%. But now, in the aftermath of post-COVID situation, we do expect a double-digit economic growth, more than 12% of economic growth and some signals, positive signals are emerging in that area. So the first thing we have to ensure is economic growth and economic progress, so that the vitality and the capacity of Indian purchasing power can be improvised. But this also required international opening up. As you know, in the shadow of Omicron, many of the international flights are closed now. Many countries have closed their international flights. Africa continent is completely disconnected. Even European flights are not permitted to come. Even India is severely thinking of closing international flights, or at least not encouraging more international flights to happen. So unless opening up is taking place, economy will not improve. So government should seriously think about helping and vitalizing the engine of growth, and that is the economy. Of course, positive signals are showing, and now with the decline of COVID, we are expecting a double-digit economic growth rate. Second point is about social stability. During COVID-19, there was social fragmentation. Can you imagine that even the family lives were affected? How do we expect mobility? Imagine what happened in Kerala. You cannot travel from one district to another district. You will not be permitted. So, inter-district movement was arrested. Education institutions were closed, and the society was put into turmoil. The picture of poor migrant workers again emerges before us, and consider some of them were ran over by the train because they were walking all the way through rail tracks, and during nights they have to sleep, but they didn't find proper place, so they slept in the rail tracks. Unfortunately, tragically, some of the trains overran over them, killing many people. So this was a situation. Family lives were affected. Within the family, there was no movement. No guests were permitted. You cannot visit somebody else. Of course, in Kerala, with cell phones and telecommunication, connectivity was there, but the warmth was affected. Because unless you see your friends, you see your relatives, talk to them, meet them, the social life will be in jeopardy. Suddenly, we are converted into a virtual life. And this virtual social development has its limitation. So we need to revitalize and strengthen our society and societal development, be it joint or single family system, and also the growth of the social groups and organizations, be it cultural, social, communitarian, religious, or any other forms of association, or including civil society norms. We require social stability, which was put into turmoil during the COVID-19 situation. We are slowly picking up. I don't know whether you had started visiting your relatives, whether they permit you to open up, or you still speak over the phone or see them over the laptop or through cell phone. So social fragmentation has to be destroyed, and social unity and social stability has to come. Imagine even worshipping places were closed. Churches, temples, mosque, everything was closed. So what kind of a social life we had? So this is to be considered very important, and we have to overcome this fragmentation and move more towards social stability. Government instructed that community organizations cannot meet, public meetings were stopped, even for marriages not more than 30 people were permitted to attend. Now all these things are clear reflections of the kind of social stigma we were facing. So the new normal demands, suddenly the new normal says we raise a mask across our mouth and nose, and then we hopefully expect that we will be saved. So social distancing, mask and soaps, SMS, rightly said. So these were considered to be very, very paramount, and even people cannot shake hands because even there was a kind of an untouchability. Visibility itself was challenged, and guests were not permitted into families. So that was a kind, and we require things to be retained, to be regained, and therefore social unity has to take place. Now come the very, very important aspect, healthcare. Broadly, I can say that the primary care was affected, value chain and supply chain was disturbed, vaccine distribution was not successful, and healthcare system was in a very poor light. So our health condition was suffering, and health administration during the new normal situation was really challenging. Let us start with health infrastructure. I would identify 6 sub-points here. Number 1, with the poor health infrastructure based upon lack of testing facility conditions. Number 1, lack of testing facility conditions. Number 2, availability of oxygen, which is our life breath. Thankfully, Kerala has surplus oxygen, but in many places, oxygen availability was a big problem. Number 2. Number 3, ICU facilities. Intensive care unit facilities in poor shape. Number 4, morbidity data, availability of morbidity data. Because we need the details of people who were in poor health condition and who passed away. Imagine the picture when dead bodies were thrown into the grave. What a plight, what a situation we faced. Very big people, very important people, but there was a total stigma and untouchability. Even the relatives were not permitted to have their last rites, they are not permitted even to have a look at them. Instead, bodies were brought in body bags, thrown into grave, and followed by filling up with mud and other things, and the kind of unceremonious burial itself was a clear example of how we were facing the situation. And the morbidity data include the following. We should have data, and we must have at least the name and address of the person, his or her age, 3, gender, 4, date of birth. At least these 4 are important. Even today, even in Kerala, there is a mismatch between the government statistics of people who died and probably the actual number. So morbidity data include name, address, age, gender, and date of birth. Number 5 on this point is digital updating, because health data has to be updated frequently, and digital data, we are lucky that way because digital data, any amount of data can be collected, but of course field work is important and collated and updated. So digital updating is important. And finally, health infrastructure also require vaccine availability, because we suffer from vaccine inequality. We need vaccine equity, but vaccine availability is still a big problem. We were hoping that by 31st of December, we will be touching 100 crore vaccinations and beyond. But even now, 60% of population are not having double vaccination. And what to say, even in Kerala, when some school teachers, around 4,000 number, refused to take vaccination. For whatever reasons, I think the government has already took up the matter very, very seriously. And those who refuse to take vaccination, as the Minister for Education in Kerala suggested, insisted that they should go for RT-PCR test every week on their own expenses. Otherwise, they will be asked to go for loss of pay leave. So I can't imagine of how, even in Kerala, this is happening. But across the country, there will be some resistance to vaccination. Even in America, there is resistance to vaccination. But what we require is that if you want to challenge and prevent COVID expansion, we need to go for vaccination, for which vaccine availability is important, vaccine equity is important. Luckily for India, we are producing. We are not dependent upon foreign countries. Rather, foreign countries are dependent on India for vaccine supply. We can export vaccines, but at the same time, we should ensure vaccine supply and ensure all the 140 crores or 138 crores of people are vaccinated double with the double vaccination. We do not know whether we should go for a booster with Omicron in the background, because the challenge of Omicron is coming in our background. So continuing with the point on health administration, I must say that we should have data regarding the history of and trajectory of virus, and virus tracking by the health department is very essential. And this cannot be achieved only by health officials. Coordination with police, social welfare department, housing, schools and colleges, etc. are vital. So coordination with police, social welfare department, housing department, schools department, colleges, etc. are very, very important. So from a law and order and administrative state, I think we should be ready and vigilant in a new normal situation with sufficiently equipped infrastructure. Because we know very well that the public health situation in India is not in pretty good shape. The epidemiology is a big problem. I must say that when I became Vice Chancellor of Central University of Kerala, I brought in new courses. And one particular course which I was very much committed was the introduction of Public Health and Community Development Department.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being such a wonderful audience. And let's go for a short break. Stay tuned for the next part.